This morning, special guests, a special welcome to the Honorable Mr. David Justice Batts, who is joining us today. A welcome as well to Haile Mikhail Cujo, whose draft forms the subject of our discussion today. And special greetings to the three commissioners who are all experienced teachers in constitutional law in the Faculty of Law, and greetings to all the students in first and second year who will be making submissions today. So the framework for the 2023 public law debate, which is the fifth of the debates, is around the idea of democratic constitutional change and four components in this change. The first is the idea of a citizen draft. A draft prepared by a citizen of Jamaica interested in what the new constitution should say and do. But we also have the framework including a constitutional commission, 3 teachers from the Faculty of Law, and then we have submissions from civil society, which comprises students in year 1 and year 2. And those of you who are joining us online or in person form our constituent assembly. And all of these together comprise our sense of some key elements in a democratic process of constitutional change. We often think of the referendum as the key element of democracy, but the process should really begin from the outset and the thinking through of the ideas and the content, hence it being so valuable to have a citizen draft to start the discussion. Take note that this series has been taking place since 2018, organized by Gabriel Elliott Williams, who is on leave and in London, but an online moderator today, Jeffrey Foreman, and myself. And the commissioners today are well known to the students of the faculty. They are Jeffrey Foreman, who has been teaching this course for a considerable period of time. He is a Senior Assistant Attorney General at the Attorney General's Chambers in Jamaica. We also have journalist extraordinaire, Dion Jackson Miller, and associate at the firm Livingston, Alexander, and Levy. We have Catherine Williams, all strong public lawyers in their day-to-day work and deeply interested in the issues which are before us today. If you are on that side of the podium, you're part of our Constituent Assembly today. Constituent assemblies are not very familiar to the Caribbean, but they are bodies created to draft or revise a constitution and aimed at ensuring a deeply democratic process involving we the people. These assemblies are usually representative bodies, different to of Antigua and Barbuda, and Ronaldo Richards of Jamaica. Ronaldo was part of the winning team at the CCJ moot at the end of last week, which is why you don't see him here today. But the idea is that this process allows students to engage with those just slightly ahead of them, but who have themselves developed expertise in supporting others in learning. To say a word about the groups which we're going to meet, there are 8 groups, and the first group today will talk about the preamble, or what Mr. Cujo calls his declaration, and that group which is making submissions is the Jamaican Sovereignty Coalition, made up of Tanelia Barriff Brown and Clavia Williams McBean. We'll hear next from Team Supreme, comprising Selena Evans and Simon Lamb, and they'll be talking about the issues in the Constitution about supremacy, sovereignty, and territory. Third, we'll hear from Jamaicans for Justice and Sovereignty on the question of change and how should the Constitution be entrenched, and they include Thresher Essor and Malik Bennett. The fourth group taking us to the first half of the program is the repeat offenders. I can warn you that my guess is the commissioners will ask you about your organization, Repeat Offenders, and its name. They are comprised of second-year students, Amoya Lynn, Sean Vassiani, and Jade Simmons. I should indicate that the first group you'll hear from includes a second-year student and a first-year student. Most of the groups are first-year students, but this group, which has a little bit more time, talking about the Bill of Submissions up to the end of the first hour, and then we'll hear the voting on the first 4 sets of areas, and then we'll take the voting, which you'll be doing throughout the 2 hours on the second half, right after. I want to end with the words of Simeon McIntosh on why constitutional reform is such an important project in the Caribbean. And he says the story of origin of our independence constitution, plus the British monarch's continuing presence in the Commonwealth Caribbean political order, continues to foster central notions of our collective identity. West Indian constitutions, he says, remain our most prominent effort at self-definition. They are our principal political projects. And by accepting and adopting them as our own, we purport to share in their conceptions of the world and human nature, to adopt their categories of speech, thought, and action, to accept their definitions of us as to the kind of people we wish to be. He says, but that critical historical truth that our constitutions came from Britain, that the originating consciousness behind the production of our constitutions was not our own, should make compelling our ambition for a rational reconstruction of a coherent constitutional narrative that would give expression to a vision of ourselves as a sovereign people, no longer in any ways subordinate to British sovereignty. He says constitutional reform should therefore be an occasion for discursive engagement of a Caribbean citizenry on some of the larger questions of constitutional democratic governance, and some of those will emerge today. He says, finally, the current undertaking of constitutional reform, and he was writing 20 years ago before his death, offers us all an auspicious occasion for philosophical reflection on our constitutional tradition and on the possibility of redefining our political and civil identity. We look forward to the submissions, and I want to start by offering the floor to Haile Mikhail Cujo for his brief remarks.
Greetings, everyone. Ixabir Yistilin. May God give you good health. Students of the Faculty of Law, University of the West Indies, Mona, I ask you to join me in applauding your lecturer, Ms. Tracy Robinson, for having the wisdom and courage to arrange this conversation between us on the proposed Constitution of Republic Jamaica I wrote with assistance from others whom I credited, some of whom shall remain anonymous. Ms. Robinson, you are, as you prepare your students to represent the rights of citizens, it is fitting to allow them to participate in this event, to help to write the future supreme law of our country. I now encourage them that upon graduation, they seek employment on the bench rather than at the bar, as that is where their service is to be most needed in our republic. Thanks again, Ms. Robinson. Students, this proposed constitution is a revolution in that, therefore, a new way of thinking, a mentally emancipated way of thinking is needed when dealing with this document. Monday, October 16, 2023 is the date I have set for its implementation after it is signed by our members of parliament, Maroon leaders, and the Taino chief, all 70 of whom have received a copy of the December 12, 2022 revision. I told both groups that I am available to discuss it with them whenever they need me to do so. Some critics have asked me, who gave you the authority to write this Constitution? I tell them, Almighty God. Some do not accept this, but it is He, our eternal Father, who has prepared me for the task and continues to facilitate me in every way to ensure it is written, because our country, Jamaica, land we love, needs it. I obtained my legal education from my life's experiences that include reading, among other documents, the Holy Bible, the writings of Marcus Garvey and Emperor Haile Selassie I, the United Nations Charter, the Constitutions of Jamaica, the United States of America, the Ethiopian World Federation Incorporated, and the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, current events in newspapers, legally based novels and biographies, watching movies and television shows based on law, plus listening to our music of the 1970s that contain commentary on the ills of our society and suggestions to correct them. Sadly, while I was a teenager, I played the music so loud that I now sometimes hearing by keeping the volume low, especially when using headphones. I therefore am one of whom Daddy Marcus spoke when he said, many a man was educated outside the schoolroom. This is part of the legacy I inherited from my parents, neither of whom attended to govern our country, Jamaica, land we love, in justice and truth, under our eternal Father, Almighty God, our Creator, to whom be glory.
In that quote that Professor Robinson showed on screen, just want to say congratulations to her for organizing this extraordinary event, which is going to be a huge teaching and learning exercise for all of us who are here. Congratulations, sir, for your obvious work and thought that you have put into this process. And even before any of you students open your mouth, I just want to say congratulations to you for having stepped up to do this. I know you have exam coming up, I know you have assignments, and the easy thing to do, the safe thing to do would have been to say, boy, may I stay in my room and beat my book here. But growth never came from playing it safe. Growth never came from playing it easy. And I hope in the work you've done so far, as well as in the respectful interactions that we're going to be having over the next 2 hours, that you will feel the benefit of your bravery, because I know we all will. So just to finally remind you, stay to time, be respectful, and breathe, all right? Una can do this, all right?
All right, welcome everyone. The debate will now begin. The first group is the Jamaican Sovereignty Coalition, consisting of Tanelia Barif and Clavia Williams. Please welcome them to the platform. All right, so groups will have 3 minutes to present. The commissioners will, from time to time, ask questions. And
democracies. These normative parts of the Constitution breathe life into the clay of the more.
That speaks solely to our aspirations for the future.
All right, so the past is not the past, and it just doesn't stay there, because if we don't examine our past, we have a greater likelihood of history repeating itself.
Future generations, and declaring we're seeking to banish colonial brutality, doesn't that in itself lay out what the Constitution maker is hoping for in terms of a vision for Jamaica? Why do we need more?
And that is why we say, to some extent, that those goals were accomplished. But if we look, for example, at the preamble in the Constitution of South Africa, it says, we the people of South Africa recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who have suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to build and develop our country. But it also says that they're putting forward this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to heal the division of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. So we're seeing the acknowledgement of the past, but we're seeing something more. We're seeing a more prosperous, or a more positive future. And we believe that the Constitution should be forward-looking and give us that hope, give us that sense that, all right, we have something to look forward to and be proud of. Not just the fact that we went through slavery, we went through the slave trade, Britain has subjected us for so many years. Our story is bigger than that, and I would want that to be reflected in the highest law in our country.
Our final question is, why do you say that the reference to Maroons in the preamble is creating some confusion?
The Maroons should be signatories in our Constitution and not any other religious group, any other ethnic group in our country.
Thank you very much, Jamaican Sovereignty Coalition. I think you've represented your views quite well and have given the Assembly and us as commissioners something to think about in taking the next steps.
Right, thank you.
Please applaud them. And they will discuss supremacy, sovereignty, and territory. Team Supreme, go ahead.
Members of the Constituency Assembly, members of the Commission, Sir Justice Battis, and special guest Sir Cujo, good morning.
The Constitution ought to be an unassailable instrument of law.
It is the supreme law against which all other laws are judged.
Collymore reminds us that no one can disobey the Constitution with impunity.
Our submission today is built on this principle and has been drafted to allow the Constitution to attain its true and intended status as the supreme law of Jamaica.
The problem currently facing our Constitution is that it is subservient to outdated and oppressive savings law clauses. Arguably, these provisions were useful as a transitionary period in the immediate post-independence Jamaica. Today, however, they are unnecessary and they hinder the development of local jurisprudence. General and special savings law clauses preserve English laws, surrender our independence, and weaken our Constitution. Of the three, only modification clauses truly represent who the people are today, ultimately obeying the doctrine of constitutional supremacy.
Current law, to bring it in compliance with the Constitution, Privy Council was able to reconcile a conflict between existing law and a base.
Got rid of the general savings law clause, but maintained others and included other types of shutout provisions.
I think what Parliament has been doing with keeping savings law is that we have been allowing for convenience. So because the savings law provide a sense of convenience in the sense that it doesn't, because you cannot challenge it, it can be amended, but because it cannot be challenged, right? It gives Parliament a sense of a safe space, right? So
there's no incentive to actively review and amend the laws, is what you say.
yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Can continue.
Thank you. Therefore, some existing.
Can continue.
Thank you. Therefore, some existing laws need either modification or complete removal. Saving law clauses chain us to the mentality and the opinions of our oppressive past, and they prevent us from accepting the progress we have made. What good is the recognition of rights, such as freedom from inhuman punishment, if saving law clauses will ignore these rights? Regardless, and we can look at Hines and Chandler. Every time we obey a savings law clause, we root ourselves deeper in the past that the colonists have cultivated for us.
In addition, savings law clauses allow us to be governed by laws that are not ours. If Santa Claus doesn't come to Jamaica, savings law clauses should not either. McIntosh highlights that these clauses permit laws we did not draft in the past, nor do we agree with in the
Presentation, and we will take your comments into consideration. Members of the Assembly, the second question is up. I now invite Jamaicans for Justice and Sovereignty to approach the platform. This team is made up of Teresa Essa and Malik Bennett, and they will be making submissions on entrenchment. JFJS.
endeavors to enrich this significant contribution by proposing a mindful view that degrees of entrenchment in a democratic society is justified and relevant for mature consideration. Firstly, throughout this discussion, we'll explore the effect of excluding deep levels of entrenchment devices such as referenda and delay mechanisms. Secondly, the impact of Article 86 on a dynamic society. And finally, I will endeavor to articulate the value of Article 86 as a solution to the bar of entrenchment by infection. Firstly, Article 86 does not reflect a use of referendum and the delayed mechanisms in talks for reform, which in effect eliminates public intent. As Professor Tracy Robinson states, the levels of entrenchment fosters a robust participation of civil society to gain acquaintance with the amending provision, ventilate views on it, and possibly mount a campaign against it. Similarly, this allows Parliament to assess the opinions of the constituents thereon. Comparisons may be drawn across the region of constitutions of Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Guyana, and Dominica. To my second point, we need be mindful that a blanket form of deep level of entrenchment protect provisions that need stringent protections. However, whilst it is essential to balance or aim to protect such arms of government and institutions that need protection, it is also our responsibility to allow progress with change in society. A society is not static, it is dynamic. Furthermore, there is value in having degrees of entrenchment which allows provisions that warrant deep levels of entrenchment to be given the significance it requires. Finally, Article 86 is essential to the Bill of Rights and the concepts of and the concept of judicial independence. But more importantly, Article 86 is an effective means to eliminate the challenge that was posed by the device of entrenchment by infection. This would allow for a prevention of what was witnessed in IJCHR, where this amounted to a label by the then esteemed Counsel David Batt, who characterized the court as a high puppet court. To conclude, whilst Article 86 of the draft is essential to protection of vital provisions of the Constitution in a democratic society, it is justified and relevant to include other degrees of entrenchment that allows for mature consideration. Thank you.
Question. My understanding is that you're criticizing the draft for not containing a mechanism for referendum. The Constitution should perhaps be praised for not including the referendum mechanism.
Thank you for your question, ma'am. Firstly, we feel that referenda, it really restricts the ability for referenda to succeed in the region. Thank you.
So you're encouraging more fora like this?
Yes, sir.
That's a good answer. What would you recommend in the Constitution to be subject to a referendum mechanism as opposed to a mechanism that's limited to Parliament?
If we're going to make anything like we've witnessed in the case of where they tried to put forward the Gun Court Act. So if perhaps Parliament is legislating on anything that has to do with Chapter 7, the present Chapter 7 that deals with the judiciary, then perhaps that is a significant enough provision of the Constitution that should warrant a participation from the public through referendum.
Should the human rights provisions be subject to referendum procedure?
Human rights would indeed reflect a need for the public to have a say, as this affects their rights as citizens and how they're treated in comparison to what the rest of persons in the world is facing on that level.
I think what my fellow commissioner is getting at is a tyranny of the majority, and the fact that there's a concern that if you put human rights provisions to referendum, the majority will always vote against provisions they may disagree with for religious or other personal reasons, but that strike at the heart of protecting minority and vulnerable groups. Does that change your answer?
Well, that does not change my answer. It just makes the responsibility of our leaders a bit more arduous by ensuring that the public understands what they're voting on and the impact of what it is they're called to vote on.
All right. Thank you very much, Jamaicans for Justice and Sovereignty.
Thank you.
And as you will see, the third question for the Assembly is now up. I hope you all have been voting and letting your views be known. The fourth group are the repeat offenders, consisting of Amoya Lynn, Jade Simmons, and Sean Bassiani. And interestingly enough, they will be commenting on the Bill of Rights. Repeat offenders, the floor is yours. Sir, would you need another microphone? Or, okay. All right, proceed.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Oh, good morning. Good morning. My name is Jade Simmons, and I'm joined today by Sean Bassiani and Amoya Lynn of Repeat Offenders. After careful consideration of Mr. Cujo's draft constitution, we have identified three main areas as it relates to the Bill of Rights on which we'd like to comment, and we will do so in turn. We will look at savings law clauses, the limitation of rights, and children's rights. Firstly, savings law clauses, or shutout clauses specifically, aim to protect laws before an appointed date from being held as inconsistent with the Constitution. As such, they have come under much scrutiny, primarily by Simeon McIntosh, who states that they are a barrier to the realization of rights. However, cases such as Watson and R demonstrate that they do have some usefulness as they secure an orderly transition from colonial rule to independence. We suggest that this transition is also needed in times of constitutional reform. However, we should be sure not to abuse these clauses as has been done in the Commonwealth Caribbean. In Jamaica, for example, it has been 12 years since the new charter has been introduced, and yet we still have savings law clauses in 1312 and 13.7 of the Jamaican Constitution.
But does that mean that the theory of transition that the cases of Watson, for example, applied to the savings provisions are outdated, and maybe we need to reconsider the purpose that the savings clauses now serve? I think in the Chandler case, the Privy Council noted that the Trinidad and Tobago Constitution, despite the fact that it was amended when they became a republic, the savings provisions there were not changed, which reflected a democratic preference for excluding certain matters from judicial scrutiny.
Well, I don't think that is the purpose of the savings law clause. A savings law clause is there to provide for this type of transition. If it is that based on majority or parliament wants to keep certain laws on the books that might limit rights, then parliament should be prepared to show that it is demonstrably justified per 13.2 as the Constitution provides for. It shouldn't be that they're relying on the savings law clause to do that job for them, which it was not set out to be used for. Okay. So to continue, like I said, we should not abuse these clauses. And I understand, the potential for political fallout, as I just stated. However, the savings law clauses are not to be used for this purpose. So we suggest that Mr. Cujo would consider having a savings law clause or a few savings law clauses in his draft constitution. However, to prevent the abuse, we should adopt an approach taken similar to Belize in their 1981 constitution, as they had a 5-year time limit on the clause.
Why would you advocate for a time limitation if you don't think that the savings clause is...
But in adopting a whole new constitution, there is a need for savings law clauses. Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I will be speaking a bit on limitation clauses. I will be speaking a bit on...
Shall alone justify any section clearly spells out that reasons for limitations would also include respect for rights and freedoms of others.
Thank you for that correction. It won't change my submission. So the language used in Mr. Cujo's draft constitution differs from the language used in 13.2 of Jamaica's constitution, demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society, as well as other limitation clauses across the Commonwealth Caribbean, such as St. Lucia, which uses reasonably required. However, it may still be amenable to some of the same principles of interpretation, including the Oakes test and rules concerning the burden of proof. One area of recent controversy concerns whether legislation which abrogates Bill of Rights provisions are rendered unconstitutional by the potential existence of less intrusive means of limiting those rights. The UK Privy Council, in Attorney General and Jamaica Bar Association, exemplifies that the Privy Council interprets these limitation clauses as allowing for a margin of appreciation. However, other judges in the Caribbean, including Chief Justice Sykes in NIDS, have disagreed with the idea of a margin of appreciation being applied and suggest a more literal interpretation of the term least intrusive. According to Professor Ventos, the former approach lends too much to judicial deference and works against constitutional supremacy. This limitation clause could serve as an excellent opportunity to clarify the preferred approach for Jamaica.
But in the context of a proposed constitution that has a single limitation provision and is very open-ended in the language that it uses, and in light of the fact that rights conflict, right? You may have the right to free speech conflicting with the right to some other right in the Constitution, etc. And the Parliament oftentimes has to strike a balance between these competing rights and duties, and sometimes there may be a range of reasonable types of limitations that could arguably apply. Isn't that the reason why having some degree of margin of appreciation or deference to the political branches is necessary in a constitution such as
whether the preferred approach is least intrusive, and that if that
the elements of the Oakes
yes, I
test.
would say that.
Okay, I see. That's interesting. All right, thank you. I think there's one more item left, and we'll allow some more time because of the breadth of the submissions. But
okay. So, children are considered a vulnerable class, and therefore they're more susceptible to human rights violations. Therefore, we believe that they should be afforded special protection under the Bill of Rights. Now, we know that there's no age limit on the rights enshrined in the Constitution. However, we believe that attention must be given to the special situation of the child. Section 13K of the Jamaican Constitution does recognize this to some extent for children. However, this has only partially incorporated for the protection of children, as this Constitution only has at Article 6 states that it only states the rights that children do not have, such as they do not have the right to vote, marriage, consent, or participate in Parliament. This language does not evoke the idea that they are inherent rights of the children, but instead that they lack rights because they are not adults. We believe that the Constitution should give explicit protection to children and, if necessary, adopt the approach used in the Guyanese Constitution as an example.
Why have you given specific focus on children? Are there other groups in the society that may need special recognition and protection? What about the indigenous peoples? What about the poor, religious minorities, and so on?
I believe that they do need protection, but I specifically talked about children in relation to Mr. Cujo's draft constitution, because I recognize that the language that he may have used, it did not explicitly state that the Constitution was protecting children. And I think, as I stated before, while those groups are also in need of protection, I think children are vulnerable and they're susceptible to more violations because of their status as minors in society.
All All right, thank you very much. Repeat offenders. Assembly, please give them your thanks. So we will, so the fourth question is up, and shortly you'll be seeing some of the responses from the polling results. I'll hand over to Professor Robinson for this.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So we're going to share some of the results. Hopefully the Constituent Assembly is vibrant and active and voting. And we apologize to the online audience because of the poor internet connection at the moment. We haven't been able to stream effectively. So we're starting with the first question, and this is going to test my eyesight. About the preambles, but you can see some of the values which persons thought should be in the preambles: freedom, democracy, equality, rule of law, the need for protection, supremacy of the Constitution, brotherhood, maybe sisterhood too, respect, protecting the rights of indigenous peoples. These are all important ones which are mentioned. Fraternity. Protection of the law as well. Thank you very much. Could we see some of the results of the second question? Oh, no one? Oh, okay, all right. For a minute there. So this was, should judges be the guardians of the Constitution? And 13 persons said yes, but we also had a larger number which said all three branches of government should be integrally involved in protecting the supremacy of the Constitution. Thank you very much. Could we see the next question too? Should the Jamaica Constitution acknowledge Maroon lands? And here we have an even tie for yes and no. Well, people are voting at the same time. So we see 12 and 12 with persons saying yes and no. So interestingly, this is a polemical issue. And I would only say that I don't think the question is necessarily about sovereignty for all Maroons, but respect for their communities and their land. Can I see the next question? On amendments and the use of referendum. Should the requirement of referendum be removed? And the vast majority said no. A minority said yes, despite the lack of success with referenda everywhere in the Caribbean since independence. I think we have had success in the Cayman Islands. Next one, quickly. Should there be a single procedure for amending the Constitution? Overwhelmingly no. People think there should be varying levels of entrenchment to facilitate amendment of different provisions. And coming up to the last few, so the repeat offenders group, we asked about a social and economic right, the right to health. And a large majority thought that we should be including social and economic rights like the right to the highest attainable standard of health and care. Notably, the Constitutional Commission created in the late 90s didn't wish to proceed in this direction. It's going to be important for upcoming reforms. And the last one before we move on to the next half, what's your opinion on savings law clauses? You can tell this generated a lot of interest with the supremacy group and the last group. We heard the progressive decisions of the CCJ, Nevis and McEwen should be applied. Savings law clauses are problematic in one view. They should be excluded. It is necessary to prevent inconsistency. They should be included. So strong differences of opinion on this one. Thank you very much, Constituent Assembly. We will be returning to you through groups 5 to 8. Back to you, Commissioners.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Robinson. We continue. The next group is the Unity Alliance. This group consists of Leanna Jones, Nordia Thompson, and Dwayne Williams. And they will be presenting on fixed elections and the composition of Parliament. We will have to listen very carefully to this group. We didn't have the advance copy of your text, but we'll do our best.
Good morning, everyone. Unity Alliance comprises of Dwayne Williams, myself, Norda Thompson, and in her absence, Liana Jones. Should the decision or time limit in which they still have the autonomy to call...
Could you tell us what evidence you're referring to?
Well, we speak about the last election, for example, here in Jamaica, where the government, even though the discretion is left to him and there's a limited time, he still called the election whenever he feels like and within time that seems to be so short-spanned. Thank you.
Article 48C of Cujo's Republican Constitution proposes fixed election dates. We, the Unity Alliance, strongly agrees with the provisions of this debate that entrenches a fixed election date. At this stage of our development, we should not be at the whim and fancy of every single people. One should believe that this would be an easy sell. However, there is some contention around the constitutionality of fixed election dates. Cujo's provision solves the problem our current constitution creates around the ability of the head of state to dissolve parliament. Critiques such as Eugene Forsey have argued that the Queen's representative royal prerogative is to dissolve or prolong parliament at any point. It is believed that a fixed election forces the Queen's representative to either call an election or prolong parliament, infringing on the power of the Governor-General set out in the Constitution. On this basis, it could be argued that a fixed election date infringes on
direct election of the executive is that it may lead to a situation where the Prime Minister is, for example, from one party, and he or she is in a parliament dominated by members from a different party. And when it comes time, for example, to create a budget and for the parliament to approve the budget, there you have gridlock, and that slows down the process of governance. In small countries like ours, where unlike the United States, where their economy is strong and so on, would situations like those create problems insofar as it leads to uncertainty and undermines our economic progress if Prime Minister, for example, can't get a budget passed in the Parliament?
Okay, thank you for your critique. I accept it and I acknowledge it.
You don't disagree with it?
I actually don't disagree with it, but I have to accept that with certain systems, especially in a society like ours, nothing can be 100% foolproof. So there is always room for improvement. So with implementing a system, unfortunately, it's always a trial and error, unfortunately.
So you think that in principle...
Of the voters by putting in place term limits, when the fact is that we have the ultimate term limit when we go to the polls every 5 years, as Jamaica has done repeatedly since independence, and we kick out who we don't want in power. Why then, in a small society, say that even though this person is doing a fantastic job, they can't serve more than 2 terms?
All right, thank you for your question. Matthew Bishop, he wrote an article slaying the Westminster in the Caribbean, constitutional reform in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And basically in his article, he was saying that even though we have the power and the propensity to re-elect who we want to be in charge of us over and over again, there still exists this possibility of stale blood. And he said that because of stale blood, our progress, yes, it is for the people to decide, but then also I feel as if, yes, it is for the people to decide, but there is this culture that we do not want to change. We're very resistant to change. So usually people don't really vote for persons because, especially in Jamaica, they don't vote for persons because of the policies that they have. They vote for them because they're what they know and they're comfortable with them.
All right. Thank you very much, Executive Detectives.
I want to say one last thing. I wanted to commend Haile Cujo on his job, recommendations. It was well received.
Okay, yeah, I'll allow that, yes. All right, thank you very much, executive detectives. They have investigated and provided their findings. We move next to the Democrats. This group consists of Leila Howell, Jane Martin, Zidane Skeen, and they will be presenting on the executive. Again, we as commissioners are a little at a disadvantage because we didn't have the benefit of seeing a presentation, which may be good or bad. We'll see. But go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. To distinguish power, to regulate, to enhance, to protect, these are a few characteristics of an upright constitution. The executive branch is the vital root of the regulatory system, which must be established in its articulation. Through extensive analysis, Mr. Cujo should be praised for drafting such a commendable document. However, one wishes to place emphasis on areas which are ambiguous. According to Article 43A, which speaks to the Attorney General's power to interpret constitutional matters, we, the Democrats, suggest that the Office of Legal and Constitutional Affairs be appointed duty, whilst the Attorney General focuses on civil matters begun by or brought against the state. The importance of this is to allow the OLACA to have a full, meticulous focus on constitutional matters, considering their importance. Furthermore, one wishes to highlight terms such as the power that he holds, as well as the Attorney General, and certain terminologies that may seem as ambiguous. Okay. Conveniently, one must applaud Mr. Cujo's reference to a specified period of time for elections under Article 33B. Under Article 33B, as a fixed date will be seen as a definite time frame to plan and organize elections effectively. Thank you.
The Democrats have suggested that Article 33D of the Constitution, which imposes an age limit of 45 years for the position of the Prime Minister, might suggest discrimination and ageism. We also believe that the term any qualified person used in the article lacks certainty and could cause ambiguity or confusion. As established in the case of McEwen versus the Attorney General, there must be certainty under the law to prevent ambiguity or confusion.
Don't you think, though, that imposing the 45-year age limit was wise to ensure that the person who is in the position is somebody who has sufficient experience and perhaps maturity?
Thank you for that question. I disagree, because I believe that experience is not static. It's something that is garnered through, while it is garnered through years of practice, we should also understand that 45 years, or somebody being 45 years old, isn't the only, age limit. If you understand what I'm saying, it isn't.
No, could you elaborate a little bit more? And just to be clear, is it that you're proposing no age limit, in which case an 18-year-old would be able to become Prime Minister?
Well, no, that is not what we're suggesting.
So can you tell us exactly what?
We're suggesting that the age limit be lowered probably to 35, from 35 upwards, basically.
But then, aren't you getting kind of arbitrary then? You're objecting to 45, saying it's too old. Wouldn't a 25-year-old be able to make the same argument about your 35 proposal?
Well, no, I don't believe that a 25-year-old could make the same argument, because we also acknowledge the fact that persons in politics, in order to gain full years of experience and understand the whole system, you have to get experience and, get their degree. The limit that we'll put it to is 30.
So at the CCJI, go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioners. We commend Mr. Cujo on his civic engagement in Jamaica's impending republicanism. The Caribbean Coalition for Judicial Independence comprises Barbadians and Jamaicans who are captivated by constitutional reform as we both pursue this process. Chapter 4 is deeply entrenched and can only be amended by a supermajority and delay mechanisms. This safeguards the rule of law and enhances judicial independence. Further, Professor Simeon McIntosh describes Article 67's establishing the Caribbean Court of Justice as Jamaica's final appellate court as the essential last rite of passage to true nationhood and self-determination. We approve Article 70's constitutional protection of the parish courts, mirroring Section 93 of the Belize Constitution for magistrates' courts. However, the absence of judges' security of tenure within Articles 67 to 72 disregards the separation of powers and the rule of law.
Well, the Article 68 says that the Supreme Court shall be managed solely by the Office of the Chief Justice without interference from the Prime Minister or the Parliament. Isn't that a clear indication that the judiciary is being put in a position to be free from any interference or control by the political branch?
We are inclined to disagree because under the current Constitution, judges of the Supreme Court, their offices are protected by a much stronger security of tenure. They hold their positions until retirement. It cannot be abolished during their tenure, and they can only be removed.
Is a statement of judicial independence saying the judges of every court in the country is a statement of judicial independence saying the judges of every court in the country shall be independent. Doesn't this negate your argument, in fact, and suggest that your concerns are invalid?
No, stating that something is independent does not make it independent. You have to take measures to ensure that the judiciary is independent in exercising its functions, and we don't believe that only stating that the judiciary is independent would do this.
All right, proceed.
Okay, thank you. Right. Independent Jamaica Council for Human Rights established that security of tenure assures the judiciary independence in their functions from the other branches and is a necessary feature of the rule of law. We also believe that the provision in Article 68E that provides for petition to the Prime Minister for a reduction in sentence offends the separation of powers. Hines and R established that only the judiciary can determine the length of a sentence.
But is this a situation where the executive is being given power to determine sentencing in an individual case, or is it a situation, does it deal with a situation where the courts have already sentenced the person and the person is petitioning for mercy? In other words, is it a different way of framing what now exists in the Constitution that allows the Governor General, acting on the advice of the Privy Council, to reduce the sentence of somebody, either in whole or in part?
We believe that it's quite different because under this draft constitution, as it was said earlier, that the Prime Minister is elected by the people and serves this very broad executive function with many powers. And we believe that it's very different from a Governor General acting on the advice of a Privy Council. And that's why we believe that this provision should be removed from this draft constitution, because it would clearly be the executive pressuring the discretion of the judiciary. Okay, we also believe that Article 68D impedes justice. This provides that the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court, and the CCJ are appellate courts. This may overburden the parish courts with first instance litigation, thereby exacerbating the backlog in the court system. Since justice delayed is justice denied, we believe that this provision should be removed. We also recommend a retirement age of 75 for the Chief Justice and 70 for other judges.
Let me interrupt you there. Justice Minister Delroy Chuck, last time this matter was in the public domain, said a lot of judges don't want to work till 70 or 75. So how does that impact? Shouldn't that be taken into account in terms of your recommendation there?
We'll be honest, we didn't consider that factor. When we considered it, what we looked at was the security of tenure provision, and we also looked at biology. We wanted to look at an age that was not too old and not too young. But our main focus really, in terms of the security of tenure and also the independence of the judiciary, was that these judges, if they retire too early, some people might not be able to have the necessary funds to go and live on their own on their retirement. So then they might have to come and re-enter practice, which could threaten the independence of the judiciary because they would be trying cases which would be heard by judges that are on the bench that they were previously on.
Short time. I think you have one more point. I'll allow you to make it.
So we strongly believe that the Prime Minister should not appoint the judiciary. We believe that judges should be appointed by a Judicial and Legal Services Commission, which includes civil society members and judges, and that the position of the Chief Justice should be advertised to the public to limit the Prime Minister's discretion in these positions.
Okay, sorry, on that point, I think the proposal is for the Prime Minister to appoint and the Parliament to vet, which I interpret to mean a parliamentary vote on whether a judge should be confirmed to office or not. A procedure that now exists in the...
I agree with what you're saying to an extent, which is why I probably misspoke when saying that the Prime Minister should not appoint the judiciary. I probably should have said that the Prime Minister should not appoint the judiciary on the Prime Minister's own. I probably should have said that instead. So I respect what you're saying, and I don't think we considered it to that extent. And we would review that later when we look at the Constitution in later times.
All right. Okay, the time is up. I'd like to probe that one a little bit more, but we're on a strict schedule. Thank you very much, Caribbean Coalition for Judicial Independence. Assembly, please applaud them. All right. So we're at the end of the submissions. The commissioners will ensure that there are more assemblies across the country to get the full feedback from everyone. But this is all we can manage at this point in time. So right now we're going to have a look at the voting results arising from presentations 5 to 8, and I therefore hand over to Professor Robinson.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. I also want to give the Commissioners a chance to confer a little bit about your presentations. I'm not a commissioner, I'm simply a teacher along with them. And I have to say at this stage how extraordinarily impressed I am by the presentations today. And I want us to join in congratulating the 20 students who prepared. But thought that there should be a hybrid. Notice only a minority had the view that the existing parliamentary system should be retained. Next question. If you support Jamaica becoming a republic, tell us why. So give us some of the reasons. And the answers include, we would become truly independent. You noticed how significant this question was to Simeon McIntosh. I support it because Barbados did it. Interesting answer. And a couple people saying it's connected to independence way to end the legacy of colonialism and slavery that has kept us chained to England. And I also hear general consensus. So a note that Jamaicans have moved closer to this position. The question is how and what kind of republic would we become? Barbados, in a sense, left that question for the current constitutional reform process. And the last question. So we asked one question relating to the independence of the judiciary, and it was around what role should the Prime Minister play in the selection of judges in the context of Jamaica, the most senior judges, the President of the Court of Appeal and the Chief Justice. And 10 persons said that there should be an independent commission that advises the Prime Minister on a relevant thought that we should consider the Trinidad model, in which the President actually determines who is the Chief Justice after consulting the Prime Minister and leader of the opposition. Of course, that has to be a head of state who enjoys some security of tenure, could not be a Governor General. So that reflects some of your views as the Constituent Assembly during the course of the 8 sets of submissions on a range of topics about each of the branches of government, but also the Bill of Rights and some of the preliminary early parts of the Constitution around supremacy, the opening values as well, and the very important question of entrenchment. So thank you for your participation, and I'm going to hand over for a brief presentation by Haile Mikhail Cujo of poetry before the commissioners return.
Students, thank you for your assessment. It's back to the drawing board. By changing the constitution that them give to we, I am already make a proposal that can help achieve the revolution. Clean and neat without it being a bloody one. All it takes is parliamentary ratification. No need.
Thank you very much, Haile Mikhail. I'm now going to invite the Honorable Mr. Justice David Batts to offer some concluding remarks.
Let me first congratulate Professor Robinson on an innovative educational tool and approach, which is, of course, no surprise. I am really impressed. I am not going to give judgment on any of the presentations. I'll stay away from the debate as much as possible. But I'll, in a few minutes, just make some observations for us to keep in mind, and which came across in the presentations: the importance of our history and our past, not to be forgotten. It impacts us even today. In another forum, I posited that the fact that the majority of people here in this country were excluded pragmatically from the mainstream, not only of the politics, but of the economics of the society, until as recently as 1962. That is really when one could say that everybody, in theory at any rate, should have been involved. One of the results of that history is that Anansi became a hero. Yes. And Anansiism a way of life. So it's still impacting us. I wanted us to comment on 2 or 3 little things quickly. The reference to age, I found it very interesting, and whether or not there should be an age limit on the leader. Let us remember Alexander the Great, before he was 30, conquered an empire that ended in India. He took over almost half of India. And what was most interesting about Alexander was that he implemented a system of inclusiveness in his governance, which was ahead of his time. So let us not underestimate what can happen. Young people, let us not rule that out. Knowledge. I love the pushback on the issue of referendum. The fact that referenda have failed should not be the end of the argument. Let us look at the question whether or not the knowledge base, the information, has been made available, and how, and whether or not that should be a focus. Indeed, it's interesting that the responses, the majority of respondents, tended to be the one that one found most agreeable. And why? The persons voting are persons who have a modicum of information about what we are discussing. The pushback on the question of the method of appointment of the judge and whether we should somehow follow the example of our neighbors to the north. I would urge everyone to consider Alan Dershowitz's impressive treaty, Supreme Injustice. He ends his book by advocating for the system here because of the disaster that divisive politics can have on the judiciary. And it's playing out right in our very eyes, in our neighbors to the north. So let us all commit ourselves to enhancing people's knowledge and information and bringing people into the mainstream in whatever way we can. So let me encourage you, students, to share your knowledge as you go forward. Congrats on the quality of your excellent presentation. I must say, and again, give kudos to Tracy. I'm sorry, professor, but as a student, I never had the opportunity to stand before a microphone. It didn't happen until I was pretty well advanced in my legal education, and I had to push myself forward. Now it seems to be a part of the whole educational process. It can only augur well for yourself as advocates, because it's not easy to get up and hear your own voice. And congrats that you are introducing it at this early stage. So well done, and I'm certainly encouraged for what is to come in Jamaica in our future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justice Batts, and thank you to all of you who are here today, especially to the students who led and the commissioners, but I want to hand over to end today's proceedings to the commissioners for their comments on the submissions and of the participation of this robust group of students. Over to you.
We'll be doing just a two-part. I'll be giving you a couple of general comments, and then Jeffrey will be giving some more specific comments as well as the results. And again, before I start, once again, congratulations, guys. I mean, really, really, big up yourself. Come, clap yourself. Good job. All right. A couple general points. Remember that submissions, your written submissions, are to assist the panel, whether it's the commissioners or a bench of judges. So you do want your submissions to be as clear as possible. Basic stuff like labeling, you know, I should know who it's from, name, team, the exercise, and so on. And as well, not asking for anything fancy, but just, again, basic information so we can identify what it is we're looking at. As well, you always want. Now, in terms of deadlines, you got to make your deadlines, guys. So if you have a deadline for submission, your submission needs to come in. Now, having said that, let's say your submission didn't come in. One solution I would suggest is that you come very early in the morning with your hard copy You apologize and you offer them to the judges or the commissioners at that stage, because we'd probably still have been able to read them, and then that again would have assisted us more in being able to evaluate your presentations. Don't feel obliged to say thank you for that question every time we ask a question. The respect shows in the manner in which you respond. You don't need to thank, just get straight to the answer. Then no, you always have to take your cue from the bench, from the panel.
Congratulations to all the participants. Our aim is to finish at about 12:03, so I have about 3 minutes to keep things on schedule. My general remarks are geared towards just highlighting some of what stood out for us across the various presentations. We thought the Jamaica Sovereignty Coalition gave a very strong oral submissions that enhanced what was in the written submissions and clarified the thinking that was at play in developing the written submissions. Team Supreme stood out for its very innovative way of presenting. It alternated between the speakers, and it provided a different feel to the ears and maintained a level of interest in what was about to take place. The Jamaicans for Justice and Reform, fixed election dates and the problems that can arise with that feature. The group was very passionate about making those points, and we understood where you were coming from in that regard. The executive detectives also had one of the better oral presentations, and in response to questions was able to identify some of the authorities from the reading list that was provided, an authority which I don't think was referenced in the written submissions. So you showed an ability to synthesize what you read and call upon it on the moment to respond. We thought that was very good. The Democrats also provided passionate submissions to us. The questions came at a fairly rapid pace, and that takes some getting used to. Over time, you will master that skill. The Caribbean Coalition for Judicial Independence, we thought, had very strong written and oral presentations. Also had the ability to respond to the questions we put to them in a way that resisted some of the points that the commissioners made, as well as accepting certain points and conceding to the need for further consideration. So when we come to consider the two categories for which we want to make overall prizes, I don't know if there are prizes available. The best overall team, we think, sorry, best speaker. Oh, see, I'm being directed to the best speaker first. The best speaker, in our view, represented the Jamaican Sovereignty Coalition, Clavia Williams. Right. Yes. Congratulations. You were very clear. You were very good at responding to the questions that we put to you, and I look forward to tracking your trajectory as an advocate or a speaker, or whatever path you choose going forward. Very clear, very impressive. Commendations in this regard as well to Amoya Lynn and Ayana Robinson, who who we thought stood out in their ability to articulate their points in a very clear way and to respond to our questions without being too flustered. So that brings us now to the best team, and the consideration here was the quality of the written submissions, the quality of the oral submissions, ability to respond to to questions. And overall, again, thank you all for taking the time. Again, thank you all for taking the time to prepare your submissions, which did involve reading material that's not necessarily totally connected to the course content, so you had to go out of the classroom a little bit. You also had to subject yourself to some degree of training and coaching, and overall you have helped us to provide a very excellent fifth MonaLaw public debate on a topic that is timely and which you all as students will hopefully be engaged in as the reform proposals here in Jamaica, in Barbados, and in other parts of the Caribbean take off in the coming years. So thank you all for attending, and for those of you who are in my tutorials, I'll see you tomorrow. That's it? Okay.